Let's just kick things off with a quote that probably sounds completely wrong. The big secret of lockpicking is that it's easy. Now, that comes from the legendary MIT Guide to Lockpicking. And you know what? It's absolutely true. Because what we're talking about today isn't some kind of secret agent magic. It's a puzzle. And just like any puzzle, once you see how it works, the solution becomes, well, easy.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the art and science of lockpicking. We're going to get into the simple, elegant mechanics that let a couple of tiny pieces of metal do the exact same job as a precision-cut key.
So, here's our game plan. We'll start with the big secret, why this is even possible. Then, we're going to take a look inside a typical lock. After that, we'll expose its one critical weakness, check out the tools of the trade, compare the two main ways to pick a lock, and then finish up with the most important part, the golden rules. All right, so that big secret, here it is. Lockpicking only works because we're exploiting tiny mechanical flaws. You see, every single lock out there, the one on your front door included, is mass-produced. And that means it's not perfect. It has microscopic imperfections. And those little mistakes are what we can feel, what we can manipulate, and what we can use to open the lock. It's really a game of touch, not brute force.
And at the end of the day, that's all we're doing. We're not breaking anything. We're just trying to understand the lock so well that we can, talk it into opening. The whole goal is to get all its little internal parts into the exact same position the real key would, just without the key. It's like having a conversation with a lock, and your tools are how you speak and listen. So, if we're going to have that conversation, we need to speak the language. And that means we have to understand what's actually going on inside the lock. So let's crack one open and see the parts we're dealing with. And here's the crazy part. This one basic design, the pin tumbler lock, accounts for something like 90% of all the locks in the world. Seriously, your front door, padlocks, file cabinets, they mostly work on the exact same principle. So if you can get your head around this one lock, you basically understand almost every lock you'll ever encounter. Okay, component number 1, the plug. This is the bit you already know. It's the cylinder you stick your key into. Our entire mission, the whole point of this exercise, is to make this one part turn. If the plug turns, the lock opens. That's it. Now for what is, without a doubt, the most important concept we're going to talk about today, the shear line. Just imagine that plug is sitting inside a bigger, fixed tube. That's the lock body. The shear line is that microscopic gap where the plug meets the body. For the plug to spin, that gap has to be perfectly clear. If anything, and I mean anything, is crossing that line, the plug is jammed tight. So what's blocking that line? These little things called pins. And here's the clever part. Each one is actually 2 separate pins stacked on top of each other. The bottom ones are the key pins, because they're the ones the key touches. The top ones are the driver pins, and these are the real troublemakers. They're pushed down by springs, and their job is to sit right across that shear line, basically acting as a metal bar that stops the plug from turning. And this is how a key defeats them. It's actually pretty brilliant. The key slides in, and all those jagged cuts on it lift each stack of pins to a very specific height. And at just the right height, the tiny gap between the bottom key pin and the top driver pin lines up perfectly with the shear line. Once all the gaps and all the pin stacks are lined up, poof, the shear line is clear, the plug is free to turn, and the lock opens. It's a beautiful, simple system. But that's how it's supposed to work. That's the perfect world scenario. If the lock needs all the pins lined up at the exact same time, how on earth can we do it one by one? Well, the answer lies in that little secret about manufacturing we talked about earlier. There it is again. This is the whole enchilada right here. No matter how good our technology gets, you just can't drill a bunch of tiny holes in a piece of metal and have them be perfectly, absolutely 100% aligned. There are always going to be microscopic differences, and that single fact is not a problem for us. It's the loophole we're about to drive a truck through. This is what's called the binding defect, and it is everything. Because those holes for the pins are slightly misaligned, when we apply a little bit of turning pressure, what pickers call torque, on the plug, one of those pins is going to get pinched between the plug and the housing before any of the others. It will physically bind up. The other pins, they're still loose, just jiggling on their springs, but one pin is stuck. And that right there, that changes the entire game. By applying that gentle pressure, we've forced the lock to tell us which pin to work on first.
We don't have to solve a 5-part puzzle all at once. We just have to find that one pin that's binding, lift it until it sets at the shear line, and the plug will turn ever so slightly until the next most misaligned pin gets stuck. We've just turned an impossible problem into a simple to-do list.
So how do we actually apply that turning force and lift those pins? Well, that's where the tools come in. But please remember, the tools themselves don't open the lock. Your brain and your sense of touch open the lock. The tools are just the way you communicate with it. I absolutely love this quote. It's so true. It's so easy to get caught up in buying a huge, fancy set of picks, thinking that more tools will make you better. But honestly, you can open most locks with just 1 or 2 basic tools. Skill and understanding will always, always be more important than having a big toolbox. If there is one thing you take away about the tools, let it be this. Seriously, lockpicking is 90% about the tension wrench. The pick gets all the glory, but the tension wrench is the real brains of the operation. It creates the binding pin, and way more importantly, it's how the lock talks back to you. Every tiny click, every slight rotation gets transmitted through that little piece of metal into your hand. Mastering tension is the whole secret. And this analogy just nails why the type of wrench matters. A good, stiff wrench is like driving a race car with 0 suspension. You feel every single bump and crack in the road. That's good. That's feedback. A cheap, flimsy wrench is like a luxury car with amazing suspension. It smooths everything out, absorbing all those tiny vibrations and hiding all the information you desperately need. When you're learning, you want to feel everything. Now, for the picks themselves, they really boil down to 2 main families. You've got your hooks, which are like scalpels. They are built for precision, for finding and lifting one specific pin at a time. And then you have rakes. They have all these bumpy, weird shapes because they're designed for speed. They hit a bunch of pins at once and hope to jiggle them into place. And, as you might guess, those 2 types of tools lead to 2 very different ways of thinking about how to open a lock. One is slow and methodical, and the other's, well, it's fast and chaotic. This comparison is just perfect. Single pin picking, or SPP, is like a tango. It's a precise back-and-forth dance with the lock. You make a move, you listen for the lock's response, and then you react. It's slow, but it's a real skill. Raking is like dancing in a club. You're just kind of flailing around, creating a lot of motion, and hoping for a good outcome. It can work, but it's not exactly what you'd call elegant. So here's that tango in practice. You start with that light tension, then you slide your hook in, and you start feeling the pins. Most of them will feel loose and springy, but one will feel solid. It'll resist you. That's your binding pin. You lift it super gently until you feel this tiny little click through your tools. That click is the pin setting at the shear line. The plug will give just a hair. Awesome. Now you hunt for the next binding pin, and you do it all over again until the last one clicks and the lock just opens. And here's the club dancing method. Same light tension to start, but this time you shove a rake all the way to the back and then just scrub it in and out pretty quickly while wiggling it around. The whole idea is to bounce all the pins up and down randomly, and just by pure chance, hope they all find their set position. It's surprisingly effective on cheap locks, but it really is a game of luck. If it doesn't pop open in 10 seconds, you just stop and try again. Okay, so we've talked about the theory, the mechanics, the tools, the techniques, but now we have to talk about something that's way more important than any of that. Because with this knowledge comes a huge responsibility. We have to talk about the ethics and the law. This is always the first question people ask, right? Hey, is this even legal? And the honest answer is, it's complicated. It really depends on where you are. And even more importantly, what's in your head when you're doing it. So in the US, the laws pretty much shake out in 2 ways. In most states, owning lockpicks is like owning a hammer. It's a tool, it's perfectly legal. It only becomes illegal if you're caught using it to, break into a place. The crime is the intent. But in a few other states, they have what are called prima facie evidence laws. And that means the simple act of having the picks on you can be used as evidence that you intended to commit a crime. The burden is suddenly on you to prove you're just a hobbyist. And this table gives you a few examples of those specific state laws. You can see states like Nevada, Ohio, and Virginia have those prima facie laws. Then you have Tennessee, where it's about not using them for profit. And Mississippi has a weird one where owning is fine, but hiding them implies you're up to no good. The bottom line here is simple. You have to look up the laws in your specific city and state. You have to know the rules.
But even more important than any law are the two ethical rules of the lock sport community. These are non-negotiable. Rule number 1, do not pick a lock that you do not own, period. If it's not yours and you don't have explicit, enthusiastic permission from the owner, you don't touch it. And rule number 2, do not pick a lock that is in use, even if it's your own front door. Picking a lock that's actually securing something is a terrible habit, and it can cause wear and tear. This is a hobby you practice on locks you buy for that purpose, sitting at your desk. That's it.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. We've just learned that the vast majority of locks that we trust to protect our most valuable things can be defeated not with a drill or a crowbar, but with a little bit of knowledge about a tiny, unavoidable manufacturing flaw. So if that's true, what does that really say about our whole concept of security? Makes you think, doesn't it?